is Dovid Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila, and welcome to this week's program. We'll be speaking about extremism, fringe groups, and hashkafa, and halacha. And let's define it. Extremism, and I'm using, Merriam-Webster. Definition is extreme political or religious views. It's the antonym of moderate views. Fringe groups is fanatical groups on the periphery of the tzibur. So let's talk about them. Are they good or bad for Yiddishkeit? Do they serve any purpose? Why do they keep on multiplying? What does it do to the families of those extreme or fringe groups? What does it do to Kiruv? What does it do to our image, Bein Hagoyim? Does it make a Chilul Hashem? Should we care? What are some of the fringe groups I'm talking about? The anti-vaxxers. They just had a big rally, was covered internationally in Monsey. The Neturei Karta. Here are the children screaming, "Free Palestine." Chassidish kids marching up and down in front of the UN screaming, "Free Palestine." Peleg. If you didn't hear him, he's screaming, "To Auschwitz, but not to the tzava." Auschwitz v'lo l'tzava. And what about the Frumsters? What does that mean? Nobody is religious enough. There's no end to how frum you could be. Here's a letter in last week's Yated. Dear editor, I love reading the Yated. It was to my shock and horror that I saw last week you had a picture of the Statue of Liberty with her elbow exposed. This is 100-foot tall, a green bronze lady with her statue with her elbow exposed. As a proud alumni of Beis Yaakov of Monsey, I'm brought back to my senior year there, 2011, where we had a picture of the Statue of Liberty. Our esteemed principal brought to our attention that, of course, we cannot have such scenery. We were ashamed. How could we overlook such a fundamental thing? And therefore, we painted her sleeve longer to cover her elbow. How did this get past your editors? When we passed the Statue of Liberty on the highway, I rushed to cover my pure boy's eyes. But they didn't have to travel anywhere to see her elbow. It showed up in my living room last Shabbos in the very newspaper that I allow into my house. This is, etc., published in the Yated, the Hirurim Royam of seeing the elbow of the Statue of Liberty. We will talk about Leiv Tahor. They cover the women in burqas, etc. So we will be speaking about the fanatical groups and who are our guests. We will have Refoel Koenig. He fled from Leiv Tahor. This is the first interview. He was asked to give interviews, CNN, NBC. For some reason, he said no. He's going on the Yeshiva Shalmaila. The first time an escapee of Leiv Tahor is coming out and telling about his experience in Leiv Tahor. We will have Rabbi Dovid Bashevkin. He's the head of Chinuch for the OU, for their NCSY Kiruv division, which has literally, I think, tens of thousands of kids in the program. We will have Jonathan Rosenblum, who's considered the most influential Haredi writer, columnist for Mishpacha, biographer of many Gedolim, including, I say this with prejudice, my Shver Zechar and Levracha's father, Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich, is one of the many biographers he's written. And next week we will continue this topic. We will have a whole battery of esteemed guests. Before we begin, I do want to mention the rally in Monsey that was so widely covered and how one person took it upon himself. I think 200 different media channels covered it. And it was called the Jewish Anti-Vaccine Rally. It was done by Hillel William Handler, was the organizer. We invited him onto the program. He refused to come. And we'll play a few clips from that rally.
The mayor of New York City and he's a very, very sneaky fellow. What did the mayor of New York City decide to discuss publicly for 8 million people? The Hasidim. Julius Streicher in Nazi Germany had a magazine called Der Stürmer. And on the front page of Der Stürmer was always a motto, a picture of a Hasidic Jew with a long, curved nose, and underneath was the line, Die Juden sind unser Unglück. The Jews are our misfortune. Hitler's favorite magazine. Demonization of the Jews. Now where did they get these Hasidim from? In Germany, the Jews were not Hasidim. They wanted a very visible target that you could point to and spot right away to demonize. And so we Hasidim have been chosen as the target.
So here is Hillel Handler in front of hundreds of men and women, right? For the most part, I would imagine, somewhat naive. He's comparing Bill de Blasio, who I know him pretty well. He's comparing him to Julius Streicher, who was Hitler's favorite publisher, right? And if you go, he published Der Stürmer, which he mentions in the clip. And if you go to Der Stürmer on Wikipedia, it says almost every issue had the pictures of Jews squeezing blood from Nazi children, from German children. He called for the extermination of the Jews, like he says, like you kill lice. He called them, he asked for the annihilation of vermin. He called the Jews vermin. He had pictures of Jews drinking blood, and he had pictures, pornographic pictures, very often, it says, Wikipedia says almost every week, of Jews raping German women. He was hung in Nuremberg. So when the mayor of New York says that the largest breakout in New York of measles was in statistically, in a Hasidic neighborhood, he's comparing him to a magazine that basically created the Holocaust, and he was hung because of it. I think vaccines, and I've said it on the program, we said that, there are certainly people who have conditions, they have challenged immune systems, we had physicians that speak about it, but this is just so crazy and off the... Here's another clip from him.
The Centers of Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, are liars. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that the Centers for Disease Control is a rat's nest of corruption. They're criminals.
Okay, so Hillel Handler says the CDC is all lies. It's a conspiracy theory. The doctors, the CDC, the doctors are all ignorant, uneducated, and they're basically, the CDC is a big conspiracy. He's not the only one, by the way, of the anti-vaxxers who believe in conspiracy. Here's another one of the anti-vaxxers, one of the leading ones in Lakewood, who we interviewed, and this is what he says about 9/11.
We don't know who caused the bombing of 9/11. One thing we do know is that it wasn't 19 terrorists flying airplanes using box cutters. That we know 100% clearly. If you were to research the subject,
it was not.
Come to the
same
conclusion. No.
Who was it?
Absolutely
who was
impossible.
it?
It's not important who it was. It's not important who it was. It's important who it wasn't, and it's important to open up your mind to the information that you're fed and to see both sides of a question. Yes,
so
it is important.
You're saying that in effect, it wasn't the 19 terrorists who did the bombing of 9/11?
Impossible.
So I'm curious, who do you think did it?
It's not important. That side of the question is a secondary question.
So
the most important thing is that when you're fed information, do you have the ability to think critically about information that you are fed? When you turn on the television, you turn on the internet.
What is the alternative theory to 9/11?
It's not important for this discussion. It's not important what happened. It's important what didn't happen.
So, conspiracy theorists, we'll talk about that later. I mean, they don't believe in it. There's many other things. As you know, you can actually join today an organization that believes the world is still flat, right? The Flat Earth Society and it's all a conspiracy. All the pictures from space are a conspiracy, that the world is round, is a globe, is a conspiracy. But here's a question that I would ask. If he would have come on, I would have asked. I would have said, the Gemara in Kiddushin and Samach Tes talks about how kings used to have tasters. What does it mean? Before they would drink wine or eat food, they wanted to make sure it wasn't poisoned, so somebody would taste it for them. So here's what's interesting. There are, in the United States, 750,000 doctors, and according to publications, 99% of them vaccinate their children. So these 99% of doctors, 99.5%, whatever the number is, they're actually vaccinating their own children. They act as our tasters. The CDC, all their doctors, their physicians, they vaccinate their own children. So they're conspiring to kill us through vaccines, but they act as a taster and they vaccinate their own children. I mean, does this make any sense to you? Now here's another clip from this Hillel handler.
So Moshe Feinstein said, you cannot take any medicine and you cannot take any injection unless you're sick. And the reason that Moshe Feinstein gives is, every single medicine has risks. Every single injection has greater risks. And if the doctor tells you it's nothing, it's just like a piece of candy, don't believe him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay? That's from Moshe Feinstein. And Moshe Feinstein also said that many doctors are Rishoim, they're evil people, because they use fear tactics to force you to do what they want. They scare you. Oh my God, if you don't take the measles vaccine, your child is going to drop dead, or he'll be sick for life. And of course, being a very simple person, you don't know medicine, you get scared. Okay, give it to him. So
he says, Reb Moshe says doctors are Rishoim. And he says, Reb Moshe says you should only take medication after you're sick, not beforehand. So first of all, I challenge where he writes doctors are Rishoim. We've gone through Igros Moshe a number of times. Or where does he say anything against vaccinations? In fact, they're both lies. I say this on it. They're both lies. He has no sources for this. And Reb Dovid Feinstein urges everyone to vaccinate. In fact, Reb Dovid says on anybody who argues, he says, who made you a medical expert? Did you go to medical school? I mean, did you even go to college? We don't know if you graduated high school, but did you go to college? Do you have any medical degrees? These are the questions that I would ask him. And by the way, you know what I say about conspiracy theorists? I would say that, we mentioned 5 groups. And by the way, when I talk about anti-vaxxers, there are many women who don't want to vaccinate their children because they've had some type of an experience. And I don't criticize these women. It's hard to argue with a Jewish mother who is scared and who feels that she's had some type of an experience. But I certainly take exception with those who organize rallies. So here is this. You have the Neturei Karta, Peleg, anti-vaxxers, the Frumsters, Leif Teuer, and by the way, I had a 6th one on here, those who, promote protecting pedophiles, etc. There is a strong group. You can't take a pedophile to the police, etc. So there's an expression, cockroaches don't come in singles. So we did a little search on this Hillel handler. He's an anti-vaxxer. He's a Neturei Karta. He also believes strongly in not prosecuting pedophiles. There was a pedophile in Brooklyn. He came strongly to his defense. When you have one conspiracy theory, there's endless conspiracy theories. He probably believes the world is flat too. There's a verse from Reb Chaim Brisker. The Gemara says in Chagiga, Gimel Amid Beis, the Gemara says, Eze Shaita. Who's a Shaita? Somebody who goes out Yechidi Balayla. He goes out alone by light. He's a lon bebeis akfaris, v'amakaris ksusai. He tears his begadim. And the Gemara says you need all 3. The Gemara says why? The Gemara says because if he just has one, maybe he's lon bebeis akfaris. He has some reason. He wants a ruach tumah. He wants to have some type of a tumadik spectacle. Maybe he's lon yechidi balayla because he says gandrifus achte. He has some shade that he's a friend of that goes along with him. Maybe bekarik susai because he's having very deep, troubling thoughts. So for each one individually, but for all 3, you say he's a shaita. So they say, Reb Chaim Brisker said, if he does all three, why do you say he's a shaita? Maybe he has this teretz for Lon Yechidi. He has the other teretz for going for Mekarik Susai. He has the other one for Yaitz Yechidi Balayla. So Reb Chaim says, when you could have one teretz that answers all your kashas, you don't go for three different teretzim. When somebody's an anti-vaxxer, he's a notorious character, defender of pedophiles, we say, you know what? We're not looking for three different teretzim. We say conspiracy theorists, there's no end to what they believe. Let's say a word on the Zmanim that we're going through. We're coming up to Shavuos. The Magen Avram asks a famous kasha. He says, Torah was given not on Nun, the 50th day, but on Yom Nun Aleph, right, which is the second day of Shavuos. So he asks, why do we celebrate the Yom Tif the day before Matan Torah? Matan Torah was the 51st day. We celebrate on the Shavuos. He says there's something wrong with the calendar. We celebrate Shavuos at the end of on the 50th day, not the day that Torah was given on. And he says his teretz. Here's another question. Pesach is called for what happened on that day. Al Shem Shepasach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is Shavuos named for? It's not named for Matan Torah. It's named Tispru Chamishim Yom Sheva Shabbos Tmimos. It's named for the weeks that precede it. Why is the Yom Tif named for what becomes before the Yom Tif, as opposed for the day it occurred? It should be called Yom Matan Tereseinu, not the day before it. Those are the two questions. And I want to suggest an answer, which I've seen in the Alta von Slobodka, both, maybe it was the Alta von Kellam I saw it in. We'll post our Maram Bekaimis. And I want to quote one of the most famous basketball coaches who ever lived. They asked him how he wins so much. He says, everybody has a burning desire to win. But he said few people have a burning desire to do the work beforehand that you need to win, the practice, the hours and hours of preparation. That nobody has. So the Alta says, he says, you know why it's called Shavuos? These are the Mem Tes Yom, neged the Mem Ches Yom Mem Shater, Niknas Behem, the Mem Ches Drachem, or 49 days of Tahara. He says, so these are the prep days for Kabbalah Satira. And you know what? The preparation, taking the test, it's very easy if you did the work. If you didn't do the work, you could get up the day of the test. You could drink caffeine. You could carry a picture of your Shaila Karistir. So they garnished helfin. If you did the work, you'll pass it, and if you didn't, you won't. Like somebody once said, stress is what you have when you don't know what you're doing. So Pesach was a sarusa de le'ela. Halalu aved zarav. Halalu. It was without any preparation. It's called Al Shem the Chag. Shavuos is named after this is the days when we were supposed to have already Koenig Kedusha. We counted towards it. You know how we call the Yom Tif? We call it in the name of the preparation. Fail to prepare to fail, like the Chacham said. And this answers both kashas. It's called Shavuos because you want to pass, you want to be Makabel Torah. It's all about the preparation. It's about the practice, the test, etc. And you know what? And that's why we celebrate Shavuos the day before Kabbalah Satira. It's a celebration of the work needed to accomplish something in life. And let me share with you something beautiful. It says, Vavram Zakein Baba Yomim, and the Zohar HaKadosh, brought by all the great, told us, everybody brings the Zohar HaKadosh, says, what does it mean, Vavram Zakein Baba Yomim? They bring from the Zohar, he brought all his days with him. Every day, beautiful, shining days. They were all accomplished, full days. He brought them with him. So here's my question on the Zohar. The Gemara, the Medrash says in Bereshis Rabbah Samach Dalad Dalad, Reb Yochanan and Reb Chanina, and the Rambam writes this too, Ben Mem Ches Shanim, Hikir Avram is Bayrei. Avram was 48 years when he was Makir is Bayrei. So here's the question. If it took him 48 years How could you say Avram Zakin, Baba Yamim? Or for that matter, Sarah, who was almost Avram's age, she says, Bas Kuf, Bas Chaf, Bas Chaf. It took her till she was 40, till she was Makira's Boira. How could we say she had Bas Kuf, Bas Chaf, everything with Kulam Shav Taiva? She wasn't Jewish. She didn't discover the Rebbeinu Shalom for most of it, for a good chunk of them. And you know what the answer is? Because the search for 48 years, what does the Rambam write? He went and he asked, and the Medrash says he broke the Tzlamim and he asked questions. He says, if I created you, how could you have created me? It was a constant search. So what does it say? Ba Bayamim, the search was part of the perfect days. The effort to get there is part of the perfect days. So you know what that means for us as parents? Parents, as workers, as children, you know, we want to bring our kids to the chasana. No, to the best yeshiva, the best church, whatever it may be. That's when we'll be happy. That's when we'll have done our job. You know, it's not true. You know what Shavuos means? It's when you're in pregnancy with a child and you eat healthy. When the kid is born, when you feed it, when you put it on the school bus, you dress it, you pack lunch, you do the homework at night, you listen to your child at the end of the day. How did you ask anything good in yeshiva today? Did you have a nice day in yeshiva? When you tuck them into bed and you say Shema, that is the Shavuos. That's the Baba Yamim. It's not the bringing to the Chasana. There's a beautiful Torah. It says in Bereshis, Tad she'aretz desha, eitz pri oiseh pri. Rashi says the Medrash says the branch was supposed to have the same taste as the fruit. And what's the first chait in Bria? V'hi lo yaseh sakain. It wasn't that way. The branch doesn't taste like the fruit. So the Balei Machshava, right? What kind of a strange chait is this? A bizarre chait? And they say the intention of Kaviyachal was, what's the effort? What makes all that effort to give out the fruit? The branch passes the water and the minerals and the nutrients that the fruit needs. You know what? The journey, the eitz, was supposed to also have a tam, just like the pri at the end. You know, the fruit of your labor, the paycheck, the chiddush, the sefer, the shit. That's the fruit. The journey was also supposed to have that flavor, but v'hi lo yaseh sakain. So the question is, how do we get there? How do we give how do we misakin the v'hi lo yaseh sakain into our daily lives? How do we make the daily drudgery also have tama eitz get tama pri? And how do we recognize that the Yom Tov is Shavuos 2 weeks before? Certainly, we enjoy the paycheck more. We enjoy the chiddush, the vart more, right? So here's a vart, right? The Mishnah says, Loi alecha hamalacha ligbar. We believe that the end is the job at the end, right? Let me tell you something, you know. There's a word from Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. He said once, Medarf nicht uftan. A person's job is not to finish. Not oiftan, not to accomplish, not nochtan. Rabbi Yisrael said, Medarf nartan, do your job. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to do our service, to get up, live a life, al pi halacha, al pi hashkafa. That's when you go to sleep, when your head hits the pillow that night, that you did your job. That's it. You know, I had dinner. There's a famous coach in America. His name is Bill Belichick. He's the coach of the Patriots. He's the most winning coach in history of sports. So, what did I say? We believe Chachma Bagayim Tamin. So I invited him to dinner, and he came. And he told me something very interesting. He said, you know, when you win a Super Bowl, they give you a ring. So he says, most teams, on their ring, they write, we're number one. We're the greatest. We did it. We won. All kinds of euphemisms of gaiva, etc. He says, you know, I've won many Super Bowls. And you know what I write on the ring? I write on the ring, do your job. He says, I don't want a person from one position seeing somebody open, running out there. He says, I I know the strategy. I know you run there, and the next thing somebody's going to run where you were and have a touchdown. Do your job. Let me do the planning. The Rabbi Shalom, he's not doing Kyle. He says, you do your job. Me darf nicht auftan, me darf nicht nachtan, me darf nicht uptan, me darf not tan. The avodah of a Yid is count today's Sphira. When we count the Sphira, we don't say today is the 33rd of 50, the 32nd of 40. Today is the 34th day of the Omer. It stands by itself. The Lashon Sphira means a sapar is a gvul. Each one is a shining, perfect day. I counted today. I did my job. And if we understand that if we did today's job, we will makayim the lo yalecha malacha ligmar. And when our head, exhausted, hits the pillow at night, we accomplished all our avodah of that day. We will makayim baba yamim. You know what? We could have tam ha'etz ketam ha'pri. Let's go to our riddle of the week. So it says, "V'yiyu kol hapkudim sheish me'ais elef." There was 600,000, and Rashi in Eruvin and Avav Amar Aleph says that will dinei Shabbos. There's only Rosh Hashanah when you have shishim riboy anash inchi 600,000 people. Sheish me'ais elef. And Tosfos over there on the plots on the Vav Amar Aleph, Divrei Maskil Kan, says that you learn Rosh Hashanah midiglei hamidbar. Just like by Diglei hamidbar there was 600,000, Rosh Hashanah needs 600,000. So the question is, Shulchan Aruch and Shin Mem Hey Sif Zayin brings that according to the Shitas that you need 600,000. It's not enough. He brings Sheyaduru B'Ois Se'ir that they have to live 600,000, but 600,000 have to pass through like a certain road every day. So the question is, where does this Shita in the Shulchan Aruch, which by the way we hold, Mr. Bur says every year is Shemaim Shemachmer, where do we hold that you need that there should be 600,000 passing through? It says they have to be lived there. Maybe if the 600,000 in the Degolim, maybe they stayed in their tents, many of them, every day. Who says they shifted around and went through a road? Where from this pasuk does the Shulchan Aruch see any Mekoyer for this halacha? That is our riddle of the week. Let's go now to our wonderful guests.
My name is Refoel Koenig, and I was actually the first child that was born and left Tahor community. That today it's definitely a very big cult, unfortunately. About the last 20 years, came in someone to this community that his name is Meir Rosner, Mayer Rosner, Meir Rosner, and he took over control above everyone, even above Hellbrand, above my father, and above everyone. He is considered by many government officials, but beside me, that I'm the first child was born there, but even many government officials are always saying that they know very well that he's the chief troublemaker and the main leader from the community for many, many years. And I'm telling you, we're talking about for the last 20 years, Meir Rosner took over official and unofficial. In the beginning under the table, and then above the table, slowly. Since he came into the community, Meir Rosner, back in the day, still in Muncie, before they moved to Canada, he took over slowly, and then all the extreme stuff that was happening in this community was starting slowly, but when Meir Rosner came in, he changed everything 360 degrees, like a million times more than it was extreme till then. And as I mentioned, I was the first child was born there, and because Meir Rosner, I'm not talking to my father since my 8 years old until today. And everything so-called under Hashem's name.
What was extreme? Define extreme.
Whoever doesn't agree with some of his stuff, he's right away isolating him from his entire family and entire community. So, example, I'm not talking to my father since my 8 years old until today, just because that leadership and directly controlled in messages and orders from Meir Rosner. To my mother, unfortunately, I'm not talking for the last 18 years, including all my siblings. And everything so-called under Hashem's name. Even until today, I'm not talking to them.
What's extreme, Refoel? I'm Orthodox too, right? What do you do different than me? What do they do different than me? I daven 3 times a day with a minyan. I learn every day. I wear tzitzis and tefillin. I wear teilis. What do they do different?
There's a big control. There's a big controlling there, and whoever doesn't, there's a big control with everything, physically, emotionally, mentally, and also so-called spiritually. And shachris in a weekly shachris is 3 hours every morning, and Shabbos is about 6-7 hours.
That's a long minute.
And whoever comes, I didn't say that is the most extreme stuff, but I'm just starting from even the lowest part. I mean the easier parts. And whoever comes like half an hour late out of the 3 hours, or out of the 6-7 hour shachris, he's getting punishment from Meir Rosner to stay outside for the entire davening. And even if it's a Yom Tov, even if it's a Rosh Hashanah, he decided that older woman must to dress with his black clothes. Whoever doesn't listen to him, by the best and easiest situation, according to him, he's managing and causing them only a divorce. Like,
when you say black clothes, what does that mean? Like
all the burkas, like
all the burkas. Okay, the women have to wear burkas. Okay,
that's what happened with me actually. I was already so-called married back in the days in 2007.
How old were you in 2007?
Well, according the ages that he's marrying off today, I was a elder bacher. I was about in the age of 19.
And today, what is it?
And she was under 18. She was about 17 years old. Today, he's marrying off by force. It could be a boy by the age of 15 and a girl by the age of 13, and it could be even a boy it could be a boy by the age of 18 or by the age of 20, or it could even be a man divorced already 1 time or 2 times, and he's by the age of 40 marrying off by force a young girl in the age of 12 and a half, 13 and a half, 14. Whenever he decided a child breaks his rules and he's going to talk to his parents, he by himself or his messengers, or he's giving a direct order for his messengers to give malchus for this child. I by myself was beaten up from him or from his messengers since my age of 8 years old. And sometimes I used to be locked up for an hour and a half in one shot in the age of 8-9 years old, and undressed, locked up in a room, and undressed like 95%, locked up in a room for an hour and a half, beaten up with a wood stick or with a metal stick or with a plastic hanger or with a leather belt, till the person gets red, blue, black, whatever you call it, all the colors.
Well, why were you beaten up? What did you do?
What was my big sin at the age of 8? Because I went to talk to my parents without his permission. Or I didn't follow one of his extreme, or I came up a few times late to Shachris, or any random thing, or he gave me punishment not to eat nothing for the next 2 days, or for the next 3 days. I'm not allowed to eat nothing, only bread and water. And I decided just to eat bread. It's not healthy. So I decided I'm just gonna drink water, or I decided coffee without milk and without sugar is also considered as water, and that's it. That's what I was That's what I was living on. I was married actually to a Bashevkin girl, not to someone from the community. That 2 of her older sisters was already married in this community. So, example, the last day of the Shebrachas, Meir Rosner is coming to me, and he tells me my wife is dressed like a French goiter. It was in Canada at that time. So he tells me my wife is dressed like a French goiter, a Französische goiter or a French princess. That's what he told me, those 2 words. And if you think, that was the last day of the Shebrachas, and he tells me, Refoel, if you think your wife will keep on going like a French goiter, so I'm telling you, you're making a big mistake. And I'm promising you, Refoel, that if you're not going to convince your wife within the next few days to be dressed exactly with all the codes and takonas, with the black birkas exactly like he made. So he's promising me that by the best situation, he will arrange me minimum only a divorce. And that's what happened. He came to my house. Always when I used to go to work, he used to come to my house and talk to my wife behind my back. It was nothing to do with anything shalom bayis or issues. So you know what I mean. He was always trying to come to try to convince her to be much more extreme, more and more and more. And he saw that I'm against all this birkas. So he was slowly trying to brainwash her and take over control on her. Till it came to a point that once in the middle of the night, when she was still under the age of 18, he kidnapped my wife from my own house in the middle of the night, and he locked her up in a basement, in his own basement for a month and a half, 24/7. I don't know if I should say it in public or I shouldn't say it, but one thing I will tell you. There is a case that I was first-hand witness. Maybe another time I will say the name, and if you understand by yourself, you will understand. Was a case that he kidnapped someone's wife a few times, and one time the wife was already pregnant in the early pregnancy, and 99% he killed the child. In the beginning, he sold all kinds of stories, but until today, it's 99% that he purposely killed the child. Meanwhile, he's pregnant. Just because to be able to make a divorce without a child, and like that to marry off to one of his best friends, and that's what happened. Actually, by my case.
Whereas if he wouldn't have killed a child, she would have been a menekes. She would have been off there for 2 years.
Exactly. So
the fact that she killed him off, he married her off to her friend.
And it wasn't an abortion. It wasn't something like even medical-wise. Officially. And one of the excuses that she slipped on the ice on the snow. He kidnapped my wife, and she was under 18. Locked her up a month and a half. And then he forced me by life and death to give a forced divorce. He forced me, mamish. If not, he's going to kill me. Computer mamish, in all kind of ways. And he hired a dayan from Wilhelmsburg, and I will tell openly his name, Mendel Zilber, from Sachtes Rabunim. He paid him $7,500 cash to come from Wilhelmsburg to Montreal. And he put in his brother, should be in the best, his own brother from Rosner. His name is Mashiach Rosner. And then he put in another guy from the community. And the head dayan was considered, he was like the head dayan, Mendel Zilber, under the messenger for Meir Rosner. Meir Rosner paid him $7,500 and a business flight ticket, plus a hotel. And 3 months after I gave the forced divorce, after everything was by force, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritual, all kind of ways, even physically. 3 months after I gave the forced divorce, he remarried off my wife to one of his best friends. And how old was she at that time of her second marriage? Just around 18 years old. 18 years young. And he was about 40 years old. And he was actually my neighbor from under me. And he was 19 years divorced. 19 years divorced. And my neighbor from under me, and he was one of the best friends for years for Meir Rosner. And he had 2 kids from his first wife that still live in Israel. And I will tell even openly his name. His name is Elazar Rumpler. And not more, not less. You know who is his father? He's the head code leader in Israel, in Eretz from all the birkas, all the Kata Shalom. He's the head guy controlling all those women with the black clothes. His name is Aaron Rumpler.
Did you ever remarry?
No, never, until yet. You could try to imagine the first few years, I didn't want to hear nothing. It takes some time to come back to myself. And then, it's not always so easy, that's the only community. He's brainwashing everyone. That's one of his main success tools, that he's controlling and brainwashing everyone that this is the only community the real Jewish community in the world. All the other Jewish communities in the world are not the real Jewish people. And it's only Ayev Rava, like him, or, all kind of random words and statements. And that's why he's trying to make all kind of random and extreme Chumras and Takanas. Why? Because all the regular Jewish people where we live, yes, it's not the real Jewish people according to him, only him. And whoever has questions on him, he said it a few times. Whoever has questions on him, it's even worse that he has questions on the Rabbi Shalom. Chas Shalom. He's telling for everyone in the community, none of the Echsharim, 99.99% of the Echsharim is not kosher. He doesn't allow to eat no meat, no chicken. I believe, and not only I believe, I have over enough evidence that the few people that was pronounced dead recently in Guatemala, they didn't die, he killed them, or he caused their death. And my oldest brother-in-law was the first one. He killed my oldest brother-in-law about 2 and something years ago, and he's buried right now, unfortunately, like a dog on the field in Guatemala. And I would mention even his name to be more correct. His name is Yeshua Levi, Zechana Brocha, Hashem Kumdumre, without Meir Rosner. Hellbrands will still be alive today. And I'm saying, as I mentioned before, my oldest brother-in-law will still be alive today. And even 2 weeks after Hellbrands got killed or died, whatever you want to call it, I'm not going in all the details, but 2 weeks after he died, his own daughter, my stepsister, in the age of 21, a mother of 4, was also killed. And all 3 buried right now, one next to each other in the forest, in the field in Guatemala. He doesn't have a problem to go in to people's houses and even to their own bedroom. He knows every single thing that goes on by everyone. Even more than that, I know from first hand few times already that he got some, that he knows that there's some people are not following all his extreme, sick, and ridiculous, sorry for the language, even disgusting takonas that he is making, nothing to do with halacha, nothing even to do with minhag Yisrael. All kind of his extreme rules. And if he deciding, or if he knows, or if he thinks someone is not following all his stuff, he doesn't have a problem to go into someone else's house, meanwhile the husband is not there, and to install hidden cameras, even in their own bedroom. He doesn't have a problem to go in to someone's house and to hack the phone calls. You're kicked out from the community. Why? How come yesterday you was able to walk outside and drinking from a spring water bottle without a cup? In the summer, it was a 250 milliliter spring water bottle. So you know what was the punishment that I got? He invited 28 men and women and boys and girls to someone's house, and he undressed me in front of all of them, and he gave me a musa shmuz for an hour and a half. And he gave me Terina Malkus in front of all of them. So to do all this kind of extreme stuff under Hashem's name, so-called under Hashem's name, and to made up 12, 13-year-old boys and girls, and then a year or two later, if someone doesn't follow him, to divorce them the first time, the second time, first round, second round, third round. So what should I say? That
Refoel, thank you very much for your time. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye. We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Yerushalayim, Jonathan Rosenblum, who's considered by many the most influential Haredi writer in English. He's the author of numerous biographies of Yiddish Gedolim, including my wife's grandfather, Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovich. He's a columnist in the Mishpacha. He's a speaker. Welcome, Jonathan.
It's nice to be with you, Dovid.
So here's my question. We have fringe groups, extreme groups, fringe groups, and I think it's, they say, Visa Christelzach Yudelzach, just like in the United States, extremism keeps getting, the poles keep moving further and further apart. The crazy right and the crazier left. Or if you're a Republican, you'll say the crazy left and the crazy right and the crazier, each one is. So we have now, I'll roll off. In the United States, you have the anti-vaxxers. You have the Neturei Karta marching in front of the UN all the time. We have clips of them, screaming with them. Israel should be erased. You have Peleg lying down in the street, stopping women to getting to the hospital, stopping people from going to work. You have the anti-women, the burqa ladies. You have the people who take, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, there's a video of him laughing. He says, where's the picture of his Rebbitzin in her biography? Trying to, in Reb Chaim's invitation, it's Chaim v'lifshe Soloveitchik to the Briskerov, but Baruch Hashem, every yeshiva bacha today is too holy to put his mother's name in the invitation. Like I say that if Avram Avinu, they rewrote the Torah today, it would be Avram Avinu v'reyasei. You have organization, you have Lev Tahor. It just goes on and on. The splinter and extreme groups. And my question to you is, what damage or none do they do? You're in Israel. You deal with you're very aware of what goes on with the Freya, etc. What damage does this do to the tzura of the Erlich Hayid? What damage do these extreme fringe groups do?
Okay, there's a number of points to be made here. First of all, even in the naming of particular groups, some of these things are more open to dispute than we may want. We all like to believe, let's say in the vaccination debate, that it's all crazies on one side and all scientists on the other. And it turns out that's not the case. But I'm not going into vaccination. That's not my issue here, and I don't know enough about it to discuss this issue. I know enough about it to know that, like global warming, anthropomorphic global warming or anthropogenic global warming, the consensus is not as clear-cut as people think. But leave that aside. I come to this with a special background in that I'm a Baal Tshuva, which I've always said one of the things that the Baalei Tshuva bring to the frum world is an acute sensitivity to everything, issues of Kiddush Hashem. I don't mean that they bring it in juxtaposition of the Gedolei Yisrael. I would say of all the books that I've written, the one common element of all the figures that I've written about is an obsession with Kiddush Hashem and its opposite, Chilul Hashem, and how central that was in everything that they did, whether it's Rav Dessler, Rav Yaakov, Rav Shraga Feivel, and all the Kloisenberger Rebbe. There are countless examples of this. So I'm acutely sensitive. If, for instance, somebody from the Peleg or I don't know who spits on a soldier wearing tzitzit who comes back to visit his parents in his neighborhood, I'm always going to write an editorial about that. I think I called that in one editorial the most disgusting phenomenon in Israeli Haredi society that could happen at all, even though I think it's a small minority. I want that editorial out there. I want that piece in Mishpacha. I want to be able to point to it and say, here's the widest circulation Haredi journal in the world, and it's condemning this. It's crucial to me. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to remember it's not just the crazy groups. There's even in Israel today, with respect to Peleg, they're always described as a small minority within the Lithuanian world and so forth. And we discussed this. We discussed Peleg in an earlier show, so I'm not going to return to that discussion. I don't think that's fruitful. But I will tell you that I think as important and as damaging as it may be, I'm not sure about what the actual impact is. I'll just make two qualifications. The first qualification is somehow people who want I'm looking at this from the point of view of Baal Tshuva, who's always thinking, what would my relatives think about this? What would my friends from high school, college, and beyond, the people I practice law with in America, think about it? And what will its impact be on their ability to take Torah Judaism more seriously? So I sometimes think that we may overemphasize when a person's soul is ignited, when they meet somebody who can show them something that they have not seen in their lives previous to that, a lot of these things fall by the wayside. You might think, well, how does anybody become frum today? And yet the miracle of people becoming frum continues to exist. It particularly exists in Israel, where the media is much more anti-religious and, well, America's catching up pretty fast in its anti-religiosity and the condemnation and contempt for religion amongst the so-called educated classes. But in Israel, that's been endemic for years, and we fight about money here, so it becomes worse. And Afal Pikain, despite that, the number of people becoming more religious is growing all the time. So I think it is possible to overstate, because we're so horrified to think that everybody is so horrified and it's destroyed all chances of anybody ever becoming religious. I think that's wrong. And I don't know, it's very hard you can't run a controlled experiment so that you can talk about what the percentages are and what would be if it weren't for the Naturi cards and so forth. We don't run that controlled experiment. So everything here is speculative. But you see how few times when you meet a non-from Jew is this what they cite. That's the first qualification. The second qualification, I think, may be even more important. Well, Dovid, we may be too easy on ourselves. We may say, oh, well, if it weren't for this group and that group and that group, then we'd see many more people turning to Torah, whether in the United States or in Israel. And I think the reasons they don't in America lie much deeper and have much more to do with the general structure of non-Orthodox American Jewry. It's not just these groups. The most influential thing on how a person relates to Torah Jews and what they think about them is not likely to be just what they see in the New York Times or what they see on TV. It's likely to be the one from Jew that they know when they meet him at work. I think you had on my Chavrusa, Rabbi Ari Wasserman recently. I'm not sure, but I think you did. In his book, Making It Work, and his subsequent book on women in the workplace, Making It All Work, he makes the point that when you go out to the workplace, you're only doing one of two things. You're either making a Kiddush Hashem or you're making a Chilul Hashem. Those are the only two possibilities. And that's, and I think that what we do as individuals, quite apart from these groups, when we meet people face to face, both for the good and for the bad, is oftentimes is a much more impact than anything about fringe groups that they maybe read about in the newspaper or read about or see on TV. And in other words, let's not sit in our comfortably and pontificate about these frum groups, and if it's only not for them, let us think about our own actions, our honesty in business. My wife is a social worker with a therapeutic practice dealing with issues of child abuse, incest. These things are in common, not a group, not an organized political movement.
But Jonathan, this is the equivalent of saying somebody goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, I think you should stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says, stop smoking. Could we talk about the fact there's so much sugar in our diet? There's certainly not enough vegetables in our diet. We eat white flour, which turns right into sugar. Exercise! How many people go exercise for the half an hour a day that they're supposed to? So why are we bothering to talk about smoking?
Okay, listen, I never smoked, so I can't tell you.
But we're asking what damage do fringe groups do, and you're responding saying, well, it's not just fringe groups, it's people in the workplace. Let's talk about people in the workplace, and let's talk about, the bias against religion. Well, all of that is true, but the question, I had a girl in my house this week. She was accepted to Harvard, so she goes to a very modern Orthodox high school. You would consider it conservative, but we have in our house the whole world comes, right? So right. She says she went to Harvard for her, the pre-class meeting, and she was wearing jeans, but she got up and she said, "I'm an Orthodox Jew," and there was like a gasp in the class, and people said, "Did you get a vaccine?"
Mm-hmm.
So. That's just like a fraction, but the more we are considered in the world as kooks certainly doesn't help. Now, I agree that people acting badly in the workplace and being dishonest certainly, but doesn't mean we shouldn't address this issue because we also have people who go to the workplace and are dishonest. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely.
So my question is, as an Israeli society, what damage does it do when you have, how much damage does the Peleg, and I'm saying whether they're right or wrong even, that's a different issue, how much damage does it do to the relations between Frum and Freya? How much damage do the Neturei Karta or the flag burning of Israeli do to, how many Jews will not...
So David, that's what I'm trying to answer that question. I'm trying to answer that question.
Okay.
The basic answer I'm trying to give you is I honestly don't know, and I don't see how anybody could know.
I understand.
I would say at the same time that the Peleg exists, I could just give you an example. I work with an organization called Kesher Yehudi. Kesher Yehudi is an organization that sets up chavrusas, much like Partner in Torah Learning. One of the things they do, out of the 3,500 active chavrusas last year, 131 became Shomer Shabbos. Now, these are secular Israelis and all they did was form a relationship with a religious Jew who treated them with respect, who learned with them as an equal, who expected to learn something from them as well as to teach them something. We really have an algorithm to be Makarev people, and that's to get out there and meet them in personal contact. And that's all despite. Now, would there have been more if there weren't the Peleg? I honestly don't know. I can tell you my own children, let's say my son who repairs appliances and has to drive across Yerushalayim many times a day. When there's one of those demonstrations, he's out of his mind. And I know that he would get out there and confront the demonstrators probably more vociferously than either the police or secular Israelis, because he said, what are you doing? Who gave you the right to take away people's parnasa? Who gave you the right to get me stopped in a traffic jam for 2 hours? Who gave you the right to keep an ambulance to getting to the hospital where there's a woman who's in delivery? Who gave you that right? He's more angry as a religious Jew than he's no less angry. Does it stop him from staying religious? No, because he lives in a broader community and realizes that this is a fringe group and so forth. But I'm saying we really don't. The question you're asking, does it have an impact? Yes. But when then those same people come to your house, when this girl came to your house, and anybody who gasped when she said, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and blurted out their question, and then they come to your house, and if you can get them to your house and get them to the houses of other people like you, and they hear that really the rates of vaccination are, 96%, that doesn't define Orthodox Jews, or whatever it is. But more important than that, leaving aside that particular issue, looking at what does it mean to be a Torah Jew, if we can just maximize our points of contact and make sure that in every point of contact that the effect is positive. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was once playing in a doctor's office. He was in a doctor's office waiting for an appointment. There was a little boy there, and he took out a ball and started playing with him. They asked him, Torah V'das Rosh Hashiva, is this Lefi Kvodcha? And he said, he may never see another Jew with a white beard. I want his memory to be a positive one. That's what drove Rabbi Yaakov, who also smiled at the nuns that he passed by in Muncie. That's something we can all do. And if we can maximize those contacts, if we can maximize those places where we're meeting with secular Israelis. I've seen how this works here in Israel. The impact that just creating relationships that are ongoing, personal, one-on-one, can offset almost all the propaganda, because there's a curiosity, there's a desire to know, and this is more and more true in Israel today, that the potential for Kiruv in Israel today is greater than it's ever been. The first generation of rebels is gone. The first generation of people who are rejecting, and now we just have a generation of people who don't know, but they do have to answer a question. Why does the existence of the Jewish people as a collective, the collective existence of the Jewish people matter? Why should I live under the threat of a nuclear Iran or Hezbollah missiles or Hamas missiles? Why should I do that? And they know that the answer lies in the Torah. And they can only lie there. and they're curious. They desire to meet. If we can meet them as equals, sitting down with them over our texts, which are each one of our heritage, we can overcome these other things can fall by the wayside. Now, what the percentages are, I don't know, you don't know, and I don't know any way we could construct an experiment that would determine that. Should they stop? Yes. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you something. I went, after they had a big rally in Muncie now of anti-vaxxers. So I went online and I looked at the comments on many of the, New York Times, HuffPost, Washington, etc. And the comments are so dripping with derision.
Right.
If you're in the 13th century, of course you behave like this. Or, one commentator says, to be religious obviously means to put your head into a box and bury it. I mean, but when Jewish kids read this, it's true that if we bring them to our house for Shabbos, yes, we could have an impact if we talk to them, but, we have limited resources. It's sort of like on a boat. It's sort of like running a business, and you have one person in the business who's very wasteful. You have one family member who's a spendthrift. And the family gets together, and they look at her, and they say, you're like way too much money. And he says, well, you guys could work a little harder, make some extra dollars to cover it, buy one dress less, or let's buy a few less lachmaniot. But it's all true, but we shouldn't be drilling holes in our boat because we have people who can just row harder.
Okay, David, do you know who the people who were most painfully embarrassed by that demonstration in Muncie were?
No.
Who were the most embarrassed people? The most embarrassed people were those who have serious questions about different vaccinations, whether it's hepatitis B given to an infant at birth or whatever, right? I mean, these people were obviously insane, right? They were saying that the vaccines are being given to destroy the Jewish people. They're used against Jews. I mean, this was something that you get the most primitive type of conspiracy theorist. Who was embarrassed? I spent on my last trip to...
Well, here's the issue.
I've got a book here. David, I'm holding a book in my hand right now called The HP Vaccine on Trial. Now, I'm not an expert in this, and I don't know the answers, and I think there's a lot of places where we don't know. The book is written by a New York University Law School, top 10 law school professor. It's got a preface by Dr. Luc Montagnier, who's a Nobel Prize winner for the discovery of the HIV virus, a Nobel Prize winner.
Hello.
I mean, I'm just saying, it's not, this isn't the vaccine that we're talking about. This is anti-cervical cancer.
Of course not. So we're talking about the measles vaccine, the rubella vaccine, the mumps vaccine. We're talking about the cholera vaccine, right? So we're talking about very standard, where 99.9% of doctors give it to their own children. But listen to a comment. This is right in line with what the Jews' history of spreading disease in the Middle Ages is all about.
Right.
I mean, do we really need these type of things hanging over a young Jewish boy who maybe has some questions, maybe has some doubt, maybe he's trying to get a job in a law firm, maybe he's trying to go to a bank to get a loan, maybe he has doubts about Emunah? Do we need people like these? Because when they paint us with one broad stroke. They're not questioning whether you're somebody who has an immune deficiency syndrome, and many physicians believe that these people shouldn't get that. They're just looking, these are the crazies, and you are all Jewish, and you're all Hasidic, even if you're wearing jeans in Harvard.
Okay. I'll give you an example. I'm speaking at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, I have a pretty good education myself, University of Chicago, Yale Law School. I can handle myself with Ivy League students. And I got Urche in the course of this discussion, so I started to talk a little bit about some aspects of anthropogenic global warming. Now, it is and my brother, my one non-firm brother, told me, don't do it, Jonathan, just stop it. And he told me for a very good reason. He said, because in the world at large, in the place where these kids are coming from, it's not an issue anymore. It's not an issue. It's been scientifically proven. There's a scientific consensus, none of which is true, Agav.
I know. Come on, Jonathan. You're really Go ahead. I mean, I can debate global warming with you, but this is, it borders on.
Okay, so I said, okay, so maybe it's not fruitful there, but that doesn't, that doesn't settle every scientific issue. Maybe somebody will think badly of us, because they also think, I mean, let's face it, the belief in God is also treated in our world today with incredible contempt, as also from the 13th century or the 12th century, also something that only totally benighted people believe in. I thought that demonstration was an absolute disaster. Yes, a terrible disaster, because you get the most lunatic members of our community being taken as, I don't know if they're taken as representative. That I don't know for sure.
Go on to the Times. Read the New York Times comments, the 900 comments on that article. Tell me if they're being seen as representative of us.
David, listen, I'm on mailing lists. My field in constitutional law was the religious clauses. Now, I can tell you, I'm on a number of mailing lists which professors that deal only with this issue. The number of professors on this list who had any sympathy for Jack Phillips, the baker in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, is one. There's Douglas Laycock at the University of Virginia, one.
Yeah.
But I'm just telling you, and they think the claims of religious conscience are absolutely nonsense, and they should never be allowed. And that Moshe Sher in 1992 got the RFRA Act passed, right? The Religious Freedom Restoration Act passed. It couldn't pass in a single state today. The intellectual elites in America, right, will announce a boycott of your state if you attempt to pass such legislation which recognizes religious conscience. In other words, what the majority, and especially the enlightened majority, thinks is not always the best barometer of what is true. In this case, the claims that were being made were insane. But I'm saying you could take this too far. The measure is not.
I'm curious, Jonathan.
Yeah.
You think that you don't see any point to just go to the baker case. You don't see any point to the argument that the baker should have had to bake the cake. Let me ask you a question. What happens if it's a bakery and a Jewish person comes in and they want a cake for the bar mitzvah, and they say, "I'm sorry, we won't bake a cake for you because you killed our God." What would you feel about that?
I would go to get another bakery, wouldn't you?
But my point is,
not one bakery.
I understand that, but would that get you upset? No, would that make you upset?
Would it get me upset? Yes.
Okay.
Probably.
Thanks. I rest my case.
I feel sorry if I would feel, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't try, and I might try to publicize what this guy said to me.
We are the most persecuted of all people in history. Right? There's nobody been more. And I think that, if we aren't, which is why there are so many liberal Jews, if we are not extremely conscious to the iterative, slippery slope of racism, of anti-Semitism, of prejudice, we are the ones who are threatened first.
Okay, but I don't even think the Masterpiece Cake Shop case was a terribly difficult case, to tell you the truth, because the market for cake shops is unlimited. They had no trouble getting that. They deliberately sought them out. As we saw, by the way, there was a second case. Remember? They called up and they deliberately asked him now. They wanted satanic verses on it and so forth and so on. They were deliberately trying to provoke a second case which would not have the infirmities of the first case, and that was thrown out even at the state level. So I think we have to be prepared to say that the ultimate arbiter of our truth is not what people will say about us. If what they're saying about us, it reflects the fact that we're creating a Chilul Hashem, then we have to be very, very, very worried about that. And I do think I'm acutely sensitive to that, because I live in two worlds, and as every Baal Tshuva lives in two worlds, more than you do. I mean, as much as that you're in the business world and so forth, every Baal Tshuva lives in two worlds. So I'm not insensitive to the issues that you're raising.
So do you believe that it
can be taken too far?
I agree with that. Listen, if we were populace-driven as Jews, we would no longer exist. We're less than 2/10 of the world population. Everybody votes against us constantly. Do you believe that? So do you believe a scene like the anti-vaxxer scene is a Chillul Hashem?
That scene?
In Muncie,
with the wild conspiracy charges, yes. Do I believe that everybody who is opposed to vaccinations is making a Chillul Hashem? Who does not vaccinate their own child is making a Chillul Hashem? Without knowing a lot more, I'm not prepared to say that.
Neither am I. I think that the people quietly have a right to do, but when you take it out,
that demonstration, did that demonstration? You know, as Rav Dessler writes in Al Chet for Yom Kippur, he says the first rule is don't be exiled, don't make a fool of yourself. When some Jews make fools of themselves, and that was foolishness, of course that's a Chillul Hashem. But any serious person who has looked into the issue of vaccines and is still questioning whether they want to give, let's see, the hepatitis B virus, which is a lifestyle vaccine to their one-day-old child, they were more embarrassed than you were. They were more embarrassed than you were.
So let me ask you a question. As a writer for the Mishpacha, you are an ad hoc sociologist as well, right? So do we as a community, should we say, look, you know, these things get me really upset, and I think the fallout, it's like the drip on the water on the stone of Rabbi Akiva, tomorrow's like Baimer, right? They do damage. Like, we don't know which snowflake starts the avalanche, but they do damage drip by drip. So, every time somebody's in the news for doing a theft, for a Ponzi scheme, it's constant drip of damage, right? Mm-hmm. And there's very little recourse we can have in communities, I say, when somebody's a Ponzi scheme. But I think we should do what we can. So, like, one of these Ponzi schemes.
Well, we're the most frequent victims of our own Ponzi scheme artists, right?
Yeah. But so here's my thought.
Usually the guys taking their chasana money and betting on improbable and impossible propositions.
Ignorant. They have no. But here's my question. This was in the atrium in Muncie.
Yeah.
And the reason the guy did it, he says, look, I have an empty night. There's no chasana. There's no sphere. The guy offered me money. I really don't care what he says. And should our attitude be, if you are a Messiah l'dvar avera, but not stam an avera, when the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch writes, and the Gemara writes that a Chillul Hashem is ein in ischaper ela b'misa, the Gemara says ein elu she'elam chelik le'elam haba. When you are in such a mass, such an incredible Messiah for such a huge avera, right? Should we say, let's as a community, let's stop making events there. Let's show, if you want to be a perpetrator, if you want to be the assistant, Messiah is a halacha, right? Lifnei Iver, Messiah, you can decide if you didn't have another place, it's Lifnei Iver, which is a deraisa. So such a huge avera, we as a community should come together and say, you know what, stop embarrassing us. Please stop helping people, humiliating us. I will not walk into that place again, B'li Neda, as long as this stings. Somebody who did such a damage to us, to Klal Yisrael as a nation, he was the Messiah. I will not walk in. Should we as a community have that attitude or not?
Well,
I ask you to put on your sociological hat.
Okay, I'm going to put on my sociological hat, and I'm going to tell you that maybe some limited instances within our own community and what impact we have in limited instances where somebody has a financial interest that, like the owner of the atrium, for instance, your financial pressure, especially if it's multiplied and you actually get a boycott going, that might have some impact. But I can tell you, in Israel, let's go back to the Peleg issue as this issue has embittered life here. It's embittered, created mass divisions within families, between groups. In many cases,
embittered. Define embittered. Describe embittered.
Well, families where a son-in-law won't come to his father-in-law's table because he says you get hapelas or something like that. Where every family meal breaks up into some dispute about whether or not everybody's about to go into the army or it's not. But I'm just pointing out here that the community, that the majority, let's say, of the Lithuanian community, do not exactly sit around and just say, that's your opinion, this is my opinion. I'm saying this as a sociologist. We're not getting into rights and wrongs here. They've taken very harsh steps so that people cannot get let's say you're a member of Peleg, you cannot get your children into many mainstream Chadorim. You will not, and the social repercussions are very great. And you know what it's done? It hasn't weakened the Peleg. It's given us the ability to say, this is not us. It's given the majority the ability to say, this is not us. But in terms of the garin of people on the outside, so they've created their own institutions, they've created their own newspaper, they've created their own this, and they've become in some ways hardened in their views. It's not self-evident to me that we have the ability to dictate. And you know what, David, you are almost the last person, because you're an iconoclast, you're an independent thinker, to be. This can come back to bite us too if we go too far. I mean, where does this massive division in the Israeli Haredi society come from? It comes from, in part, the idea that there is one unitary, monetary Das Torah that everybody subscribes to, which grew up in the time of Rav Shach, who was the unquestioned Gadol Hador in the Lithuanian community in Israel, unquestioned. But then the consequence of that theory of the unitary Das Torah is, when there's a dispute on an issue, is that there are only two choices. Either you're Das Torah or you're an Apikoros. You're a Kofer Be'ikr. Now, that's not a very fruitful way for communal discussions to take place, in my opinion. The world tends to be a lot more complicated than we would like it to be. We'd like everything to be easy, and things aren't easy, and there are facts that are in dispute. And you and I will be the first people who, Robespierre ended up on the guillotine, right? The leader of the French Revolution. If you call too much for the community must set up uniform standards and anyone who deviates is out, which is the technique that was followed by the current editor of Pellis all his years at Ted Naaman, and did more to sow animosity to frum Jews than probably anything. But if we follow that thing, it will come back and bite us. All the revolutions end up killing their own young. We have to be very careful that we don't create, for a specific, in a narrow situation, create a movement which will come up and bite us all, you and me included.
So you would be opposed to any type of a communal reaction to something like this?
No, I'm not so confident of that. I try to be nuanced. I'm telling you, my Rebbe, Martin Lopiansky, the one thing I learned from him is any important issue worth fighting about, there's usually more than one viewpoint, and it's complicated. And I don't want to be among the simplifiers of the world, because the simplifiers are the ones, the totalitarians, the elitists, the Israeli Supreme Court, the Davos set. I don't want to be among those who say, all right people think like me and everybody else is worthless and should be shut, and end up creating the re-education camps, whether it's on U.S. college campuses or in Cambodia. We have minor re-education camps on U.S. campuses now. Major ones where they killed people in the Gulag and so forth. I just want to be careful. I want to be nuanced. And I know it's irritating. I know it can be irritating when you see something so clearly that in this particular case, but I want to examine the unintended consequences. I want to examine what happens. Can this go too far? What are the unintended consequences of something that seems like a very great thing to do in this particular instance? Is it like whack-a-mole? Will it create more dangers down the road and will its long-term consequences not be worth the short-term gain? Especially, and going back to what I said at the beginning, when a Jewish soul ignites, and I've been living around Baalei Tshuva all my life. My closest friends are still the people I came into Or Sameach with 40 years ago. If you're open to being ignited, you will be ignited. But our major thing, I want to reiterate, we don't really know on a large scale level, I'll go back to the very beginning. I'll go back to something else. When I was first a columnist for the Jerusalem Post, I started in 1997. The conversion law was the issue on the agenda at that time. Okay? Now, I come from the conservative movement. My grandfather was the president of the conservative movement in America. I wrote some very harsh things about the places where I had come from. Okay? Now, I had a lot of friends, fellow Baalei Teshuvas, who were extremely critical of me. And I'm not sure if they weren't right. They said, "What are you doing? You're just turning people off." And I said to them at the time, I said, "I'm writing for the one person at any moment who's really open to thinking. And I want to hit him between the eyes. Most people at any given time are not moving." Now, I don't know whether I was right or wrong. And I don't know, but I do think that it's true that there's some people who come to a particular point in their life, or they come to a certain realization about the society in which they live for whatever reason. For me, it was reading, my favorite columnist was Gary Wills, and then I saw that everything he wrote about Israel was nonsense. So the scales fell from my eyes about the world in which, which I had assumed was perfect and represented enlightenment and so forth. Scales fell from my eyes. That partly opened me up to a new consideration of Torah and Yiddishkeit as well. I was aiming for the person who was at any moment open to changing, willing to think. But did I create negative feelings? You bet I did. I went to the Jerusalem Post and I told them, "You have to give me a higher salary because I'm filling up not only my column every week, but I'm filling up your letters to the editor's page." When my son didn't go into the army and I wrote a column about that, Confessions of a Haredi Dad, for 5 years they were writing articles. 17 years later, somebody prefaced a letter to the editor, Rosenblum, whose son did not serve in the army. I feel, did I create negative feelings? Do I know for sure that it was a net loss? I don't know. At the end of 20 years in the Jerusalem Post, they weren't complaining about me anymore. They got used to me. And I'm not sure whether that was an improvement or worse. I don't know. I'm not as confident. You're a more confident person than me. The difference is you have to make big decisions. I get to sit here and ponder and suck my thumb and think about this, but you could say like this or you could say like that. I don't make the scale of decisions you make. So you're more confident than I am.
I just think that when good people don't speak out, when we allow the fringes to grab the microphone, I think that's really dangerous.
Okay, so I told you at the very beginning, when there's a negative phenomenon in our community, I think it's one of my primary requirements, whether it was in the Jerusalem Post or certainly within Mishpacha, to write against that, and then to be able to point to the fact that I'm being published and writing about this and this, so I'm not an outlier in the community. I said the example of spitting on Frum soldiers who are with their tzitzit out, who are defending the country. I was the first and most adamant to write about it, to write about some of the wars that have taken place in the community. I agree with you. We have to speak out. But you have to know. Okay, I'm just saying, we don't necessarily agree on every issue, what to speak out, and sometimes, I feel ridiculous. And I do remember somebody you probably know, Rav Chaim Malinowitz, a huge Talmid Chacham, formerly a Muncie, who, when things were done by certain groups in Ramat Beit Shemesh, and people said we have to apologize for them, and I think I was noted to that view. I said, why do I have to apologize? They don't represent me. If I apologize, I say that I'm somehow identified with them. I reject the fact that I'm identified with them. I'm not identified.
But then I would point that out, though.
Right.
Listen to this, Jonathan. Let me read a letter from the Yated. I'm curious your reaction. It's titled Elbow Horror. I love reading the Yated, and and absolutely loved the Yated, pulling it out first thing every week. It was to my shock and horror that I saw in the astonishing stats and facts this week that you had a picture of the Statue of Liberty with her elbow exposed. As a proud alumni of Beis Yaakov of Monsey, where my wife went, by the way, and my mother-in-law was the Rebbitzin for 50 years, I was brought back to my senior year here, to 2011, when we had scenery with the picture of the Statue of Liberty. Our esteemed principal, whose name I will not mention, brought to our attention that, of course, we cannot have such scenery. We felt ashamed how we had overlooked such a fundamental thing, and they painted her sleeve longer to cover her right away. As when we passed the Statue of Liberty on the highway, I rushed to cover my pure boy's eyes. Yet, they did not have to travel anywhere to see her elbow. It showed up in my living room last Shabbos in the very newspaper, the Yated. Let's all try to be very careful in tznius, right? What do you think? And this is the Yated. It's like the number one selling newspaper. What do you think about this?
Well, I think Mishpacha is better selling, but let's leave that aside. Okay, now let's listen, Dovid, if they had a picture of the girls from Tzeri Agudas Yisrael who went to greet Rabbi Aaron Cutler when he came to Penn Station, coming from Kobe, Japan, to San Francisco to New York, when he arrived there, most of the girls, mothers of the principals of Beis Yaakov today, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, they probably didn't have their elbows covered. They were probably wearing bobby sacks, most of them for sure. Are we firmer than they were? I mean, there's sometimes this letter strikes me as, okay, but, now, would I tell Yated not to publish such a silly letter? Well, I don't know. If I were the publisher, I'm not going to tell my friend Penny Lipschitz what to publish and what not to publish. One of the nice things about the letters to the Yated is that people get to express all their views this way and that way, and he doesn't censor them. Do I think the letter is silly? Do I think, more than silly, I once heard from another one of my Rabbi, Rav Asher Weiss, that, you try to insulate to such a great degree, you have a counter effect. You never, and I would say that by trying to isolate and insulate to such a degree, you can create a hypersensualization, which makes us more vulnerable, makes our young men more vulnerable, and so forth. That's a separate subject which we'll take up another time. Okay. I got to get to Chasana.
Thank you very much.
I never thought, David, I thought we had only 5 minutes to talk about tonight, and look how much we had to discuss and how much we will have to discuss in the future.
Thank you so much for your time, Kolta. Bye-bye.
Kolta. Bye-bye.
We thought that given that we're speaking about things that are very relevant to Chinuch, extremism, fringe groups, cult groups affect our children, families and children, we thought a very appropriate guest would be Reb Dovid Bashevkin, who is the director of Chinuch for NCSY, which has 25,000 children in its program. He has a staff of over 110. He's a Rebbe at Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. He's a columnist for Mishpacha magazine. He's a mechaber of Sfarim. He wrote Synagogue, which is just out about Averis, how the Torah, Klal Yisrael, Hashkaf, and Halacha deal with Averis. He's written a sefer, Beroiges Rachem Tizkar. Welcome, Reb Dovid.
Such a joy. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Reb Dovid, is extremism, is it good or bad for Klal Yisrael?
So I think there's an aspect of extremism that is modeling something that is good, and there's something about extremism that is very, very dangerous. The part of extremism that is good, I believe, is that it models the importance of being passionate and being excited and reaching for an ideal. I remember there was an article that was written by a Rebbe, somebody from the Hanhol of Ner Yisroel, where I learned, where he was talking about people who demonstrate on Shabbos, about Chil Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael. And he has a line in this article, this was probably published 30 years ago, where he talks about how there was a woman who was crying and screaming, Shabbos, Shabbos. And his granddaughter went to this rally, and when she came back, he said, look, we don't protest in this way. That's not our Masorah. But on the flip side, those of us who've never felt the urge to protest, those of us who never even felt the need to get up and scream and cry out for our ideals in a passionate way, that also requires an equal type of soul searching. And I think that what we can admire in extremism is that they have ideals and that they are very passionate about them. But on the flip side, the part that's very dangerous is that it very often leads to a really inappropriate relationship with people's ideals, in the sense that they don't develop a way of living if for people who cannot reach those ideals on a constant basis. When I was learning in yeshiva, my Rabbi would very often, when he was presenting the different Shitas Harishonim and how they dealt with the sugya, he would say that the extremes are the easiest to explain but the hardest to justify. And I think that means that extreme positions usually look at different values. Instead of looking at them on a scale, they look at them where you have different shades throughout. They look at it as a binary. You're either all the way in or all the way out. And the reason why extremism is very dangerous is because life is not a binary. It's not 0 or 1. There are a lot of numbers in between, and it doesn't allow people who are unable to reach those ideals on a constant basis to have a place in the community. They end up being pushed aside because if you can't hit the top of the scale at every moment, then you're totally out of the system. So I think the extremes are dangerous because even though it's easy to explain, you take an ideal, Kedusha, Tahara, it has to be that all the time at every moment, and if you're not able to reach it, you're out of the community. That's very dangerous because at the end of the day in people's lives, they have areas or moments where they're not able to live up to the ideals that they necessarily want, and we end up casting aside a role of our community. You know, we have the concept in halacha of a gezerah that the tzibur is ef shalamo to love, and I think in some ways extremism attaches themselves to ideals that the tzibur is not able to be omed on.
Now, is this similar to the concept of seeing things in black and white, or are you saying a different concept?
No, I'm exactly saying that. Black and white is the binary. You're either one color or the other. And I think that is at the heart of extremism, is that either or. You're either with us or against us. And that's Now, is it possible to say that people who see things in black and white is because it's a very simple way to think. It's a secure way to think. Like if you like this, you're a tzaddik. If you like this, you're a Russia, and I don't really have to struggle with grays. I think there's a large part of it where they are not really addressing life as it's lived. Meaning, in our lives, we may have ideals, but we're not able to reach them at every moment. So they're not really addressing life as it's lived. It's very almost like theoretical and abstract. It's just it's the concept. We hold this concept to be true and forget whether or not people are able to reach it. There was an essay that was written by a colleague of mine named Rabbi Moshe Benovitz, who runs NCSY Kollel, called Passionate Moderation. And he gave the analogy when dealing with extremism. It's sometimes when you're measuring the distance between 2 points, so you always want to go, a straight line is always the shortest way. But there are times where a straight line isn't the shortest way. Like, let's say I want to find the quickest way to get to my refrigerator. So that might be, from the point where I'm standing in a straight line. But if there's a big island in my kitchen blocking me, then I'm not able to get to the refrigerator with just a straight line. You have to go around it a little bit. And I think that extremism is always looking for the exact straight line and not paying attention to what's in between and what they might be trampling on to get there to that straight line to their truth.
So would you find, let's say then, people who are extremists, who see life as black and white, like there was recently an article in the paper, an entire Karta Mishpacha, Nashim V'taf, decided to leave Yiddishkeit. And they interviewed the guy, and he said, I grew up that, the Zionists were evil, they were Rishoim, and then I moved to Beit Shemesh, and I met a bunch of them, and guess what? They weren't such bad. So I decided everything my father told me is a lie, and they just moved down. Like, do we find that when people who live that there's only good and there's only bad, there's, and all these groups, the Notori Karta, Peleg, if you're a Zionist, you must be a big Russia. If your knees aren't covered, now in Muncie, a school came out, everybody's 4 inches. They decided 6 inches. 6, you're evil. And then you meet somebody who doesn't fit that definition, and you say, wait, like, what else in my life isn't true? Or alternatively, like, if this isn't true, what else isn't true? It's sort of like, says by Chava, Loisiga boy, so she touched it, and she didn't die. So is it possible that when the families of extremist kids, when they get exposed to situations and they say no, non-Notori Karta is okay. Peleg non-Peleg are also Yerei Shemayim. You could be frum and not see the elbows of the Statue of Liberty. You could respect women. You could look at the picture of a woman and not be a Russia. When these people, does it throw these kids into a mode where they just stop believing everything their parents told? Like a lie about one thing becomes a lie about everything?
I think without a doubt, something that I emphasize a lot with NCSY is in the pasuk that talks about chinuch that we always quote Chanocho Nara Pidarko. We also have the second half of the pasuk which says V'gam ki yazkin lo yasser mimenu. And very often in education, we give over values and ideas that suit the young child, but we don't pay attention to what happens when the 8-year-old, the 12-year-old in front of you is going to be a 26-year-old, is going to be a 35-year-old, and they're going to look at the ideas that they heard when they were in yeshiva or in seminary, and they're going to start seeing that a lot of that's not true. Not every non-Jewish person that I meet is evil and is dangerous and is somebody who's out to have a pogrom at any given moment. So what I think the educational system needs to really do is realize that the children in front of us, it's not just educating the 8-year-old in front of you, it's also educating the future 35-year-old, the future 40-year-old. Because when people go out in the world, so many people's stories of going off the derech begin with the feeling that they were sold a bill of goods, that they were part of this like value Ponzi scheme where they were given ideas and values that just simply do not measure up in their adult lives. And I think it's very, very dangerous when we oversell our values without any attention to what this child's going to experience when they go out in the world. I think that the biggest danger, and this kind of gets back to the question of extremism and kanoyos, is do you build your religious identity, your sense of self as a person based on who you are or on who the other person is? And I think a healthy relationship to Yiddishkeit and to Torah and mitzvos is based on what those ideals and what those concepts give to you and not what the other person who's farther from it, how they're evil and risha'im and distant. And I think a lot of times extremism leads to this oppositional identity that who I am is based on what I'm not rather than what I am. And I think that that's very dangerous because then you can go out in the world and look at, I thought that these people were evil and all of these other things, and they're very decent, fine people who chose a different way of life than me. And I think that can be very, very scary for people.
So is moderation, the Rambam writes at length about moderation, the derech hamamutza. What is so frightening about being a moderate, about the derech hamamutza to most people, or to many extremists find it terrifying to be the derech hamamutza? What is so scary?
I think that we have done a poor job, and when I say we, I'm talking about the mainstream community of Yiddishkeit, of showing how being passionate and excited and idealistic is not incompatible with being moderate and normal and well integrated. We've lost sight of that. So the reason why extremism is exciting is because it's subversive, it's different, and it's passionate. It's passionate. Nobody, when they're young and they're idealistic, especially young people. Rav Gedalia Shor has an essay where he talks about the word nar, meaning a teenager, comes from Milashon Hisorurus. It's based on a Maharal. But nar is the time when you're young, you want to be idealistic. So very often you gravitate towards these extremes because you think the only place where idealism and passion can exist is in kind of these like fringe communities. But we need to do a better job of teaching them how, number one, Jewish history is full of kind of fringe groups that have been cast aside or didn't work out or disrupted. And
Give us some examples. Give us some examples.
I think the most famous example in recent history, and I don't want to group, every extremist group is not comparable and they're not all necessarily, I don't want to be extremist about extremism, so I don't want to talk about it as a binary. There was a famous incident. My grandfather was a Talmud and Torah V'das. He ended up going to he actually broke off with Rav Dovid to start Yeshiva Chafetz Chaim, the first graduating class. But in the early history of Torah V'das, there was a famous incident where there was a group called the Malachim. And the Malachim in the yeshiva were like a fringe sect group who they davened extra long, they were extra passionate, but they were a little bit kanayish. They're a little bit kanayish. And Rav Shraga Feivel, what he did in establishing the contemporary system of chinuch that we had, he was all about making kedusha accessible and normal. That was his guiding principle. And he wrote a tshuva to Rav Baumel, I think in Tshuva's Emek Halacha, where he asked, what should I do with these people? And the response was that he should throw them out of the yeshiva. And that's exactly what he did. He kicked them out of the yeshiva. They were banished from Torah V'das because he felt that their model of kedusha was not making it accessible to American Bachrim. And so
define accessible. When you say accessible, what do you mean accessible to American Bachrim?
I think particularly with the Malachim, their style of specifically being against the establishment, again going back to this concept of the oppositional identity. And you could read about this. There's a great book called Hasidic People, which was written by Jerome Mintz, which has interviews with Gedolei Olam and Hasidic Rebbes who lived through these times. And in that book, he has interviews where he talks about how the Malachim were all about kind of breaking off from the mainstream in the yeshiva. They didn't want to necessarily daven with everybody else at the same time. They would criticize the leadership of the yeshivas and of other gedolim at the time. And I think when so much of the way that you get people excited about Yiddishkeit is by distancing them yourself from others, then you can end up subverting the entire ability to have a mossad, to have a chinuch institution. So you have to be really careful about this.
Both the Steipler and the Chazon Ish write against extremism, and the importance of being normal. Like Rabbi Yitzchak Fegelstock always tells us, Bachar, Madav Zayin Normal. Could you give us are you aware of the writings of the Chazon Ish and the Steipler? Can you share them with the Eilam?
So the Chazon Ish has a brilliant letter. He has a letter, I think it's in Chelik Aleph of his Igros. I think it's the 20th letter, where he gives a list of 6 things for every yeshiva bacher, 6 kabbalas that a yeshiva bacher could have. It's a fascinating list because we don't have, I write lists for Mishpacha magazine. It's more joking list. This is 6 easy things that every yeshiva bacher should take upon themselves. And one of the things on the list is that you should stay away from things that are weird and different because it distances yourself from the community. And I think that what the Chazon Ish was dealing with was that as the Haredi community in Eretz Yisrael was beginning to kind of come together and form a movement, he was worried that people were going to break off and take on all sorts of strange Kabbalas. And in the letters of the Steipler, every page after page is dealing with Koilo Yungerman and Yeshiva Bachrim, whose relationship with Yiddishkeit was not able to be integrated with their day-to-day lives. They weren't able to get through davening because they were nervous that I didn't say something with kavana, or they didn't feel that they were frum enough, or they felt that if they slipped up and they committed an aveiro or they did something inappropriate, that they couldn't show up to yeshiva the next morning. And page after page, what the Steipler reminds them is that failure and difficulty in religious life and in yeshivas is something that is normal. It doesn't disqualify you from being a part of the system, and to keep being a part of Yiddishkeit. And I think his letters are so moving. There was a book that was written by two psychiatrists who live in Eretz Yisrael called Sanity and Sanctity. And it highlights the letters of the Stipler in particular as being so consoling to that emerging community in Eretz Yisrael. It's not the community that we know now. It was just starting to emerge.
Well, one of the things he writes, by the way, is, there's a Hasidus in Eretz Yisrael, will go unnamed, that they have pages and pages and pages of takanas of how a husband and wife are allowed to interact.
Yes.
How, when you take a walk together, how many blocks you have. Pages, and he writes that it's absolutely usher. It's not al pi Torah. It's chadash usher manav Torah. It's he just comes out very strongly. He writes really, and this is an example of sort of newfound kanois and extremism that doesn't exist. It's like, I think the Chazon Ish said the Yidden before Matan Torah. Post-Matan Torah, we have let me ask you about the anti-vaxxers. Could you explain this movement? Because it has nothing to do with the Torah. Like, when you take the Lev Tahor or the Burqa people, at least they could say, look, they could point to a Rambam. The Rambam writes back in his times a woman used to wear, so they say Bismanenu too. But there's nothing in the Torah against vaccines. 99.9% of doctors. Why did this, sort of anti-science movement, how has it become a part of, where you have, from a people believing that anti-vax, somehow they're tying it into Yiddishkeit? Is the next thing going to be like anti-leather or anti-shoes? It's just a strange juxtaposition. Could you explain that?
So I have a little bit of a different angle in which I've seen the anti-vaxxer community, and that I actually don't think that it is necessarily a Hasidic phenomenon. I grew up in the house of a doctor. My father's an oncologist who serves nearly exclusively or primarily in the Hasidic community. He serves a great deal in Satmar. And I grew up in a home where the Hasidic community very much embraced medical expertise and really ran after the importance of finding the best doctor in the area. The works of Meilich Führer from Ezra Lamarpa and these people. The Hasidic world in many ways, and it's so sad that this story is crowding out some of the remarkable achievements of the Hasidic world, particularly in medical advancements and in medical help. I think that the anti-vaxxers is really a product of two things. It's a product of a little bit of distrust of authority and early correlations that people, which were totally unfounded, not in the Hasidic world, in America, in the liberal world, on the West Coast, where not the non-Hasidic community, the non-Jewish community, connecting this to autism, which was completely unfounded. But people were very nervous about kind of letting the establishment and power have connected to the young Kinderlach. You have a young child, you want to keep them so pure and so perfect that it was scary for them to kind of allow these major medical institutions go into their young child, where when people get older, they obviously realize that, of course, you need them there. And I think that it came from really just under-education and improper education that was really across the country, and unfortunately these rumors metastasized into a movement that affected the Jewish community and affected the non-Jewish community. But I think why is it statistically so attacked from the Hasidic community? You can't deny that. I think that statistically, my understanding is that in the Hasidic community, obviously, I think the numbers are comparative to some of the others, but because we are so close together on vacations and we have travelers from Eretz Yisrael, it's able to spread much, much quicker. But a third of the incidents in the United States have occurred in Borough Park and Williamsburg. You're saying that that's a statistical, it's not a statistical odyssey that a group of 250,000 people have a third of a country of 350 million people's measles? It likely is not. I certainly can't say definitively one way or the other. I would say two things. Number one is that the messaging I have seen, and they've mobilized to a degree and stepped it up much more recently. The messaging from the main institutions is that you absolutely have to get a vaccination. I think that institutionally we were a drop late. We did it like after the initial headlines broke, and we should have been a little bit more emphatic, much earlier.
But the question is, my question is that why is it that it is embraced? It has nothing to do with Hasidus, nothing to do with the Baal Shem Tov, nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. Why has this community, and I don't say just this community, it's other from communities too, but the press is certainly giving it a lot. Statistically, Borough Park, Williamsburg. Why have they embraced? It's statistically far greater likelihood in that community than in any other community in the United States. Why?
If I had to point to anything, it would be our suspicion and distrust of major institutions that are not from our community. And
but they all use hospitals.
But it is exacerbated with very young children, where when we have a young yingala, a young Jewish child in our hands, we start to believe a lot of the rumors and the fears that we see about incidences of all these other diseases that have purportedly been linked to, not medically, but purportedly been linked to all these other diseases, that you could end up buying into a lot of these rumors. And when the community is so tightly wound and homogeneous, it's a perfect storm that allows these rumors to metastasize into fact, when in fact they are not. So when you're hearing your news sources from the same group of people, it's the same extremism that happens in politics. When you have these homogeneous groups that live together, they're getting their news sources from one place, it's much easier for rumors to metastasize into facts, and that's why it's important to have independent verification and to learn how do you know something is true, which is something that maybe in our yeshivas and schooling system is worth thinking about nowadays.
So let me leave you with two questions. Do you believe that many of the extreme, the person who's an anti-vaccine, the Tarkaret, the Peleg, the Overfrum, the anti-women, the Leif Tahor, the Burqa, do you believe it's coming from a religious place, or are these people inherently just extremists? And there is the extreme personality, the person who only sees things from one side. When you get into an argument, they can't even see another side. And what would be the litmus test? That, for example, this fellow Hillel Handler, who ran the rally in Muncie, he's an anti-vaxxer. He's anti-Israel. He's one of the marchers, against the Israeli flag, to burn the flag. He's pro-defending pedophiles, like there was this fellow Weingarten. He's absolutely against the court system. You cannot, and if I met him, I would imagine that he probably supports Peleg and maybe Leif Tahor too. Like, they don't check just one box. So, like, in many of these cases of these extremists, it's not actually a halachic, hashkafic position, but and not all of them, but many of them, but it's just an extreme personality type of extreme distrust. And therefore, it's more of their personality than actually has anything to do with the issue.
I would make a distinction between leaders in some of these fringe movements and the followers. I think very often the leaders are people who have very specific personality types and a very specific way of framing values. They have that black and white binary way of looking at the world. And I think that they take advantage of sincere religious beliefs of their followers, where the followers are really looking to be led and find a movement that has ideals and passion and excitement, and these religious leaders are taking advantage of those ideals. So I think very often the followers can be very decent people, but the leaders, I think about like the Westboro Baptist Church and some of the studies that have been done on there. Many people have left that church. There was an article in the New Yorker, about one of the women who left the church. She left the church by being exposed to Yiddishkeit. She didn't become Jewish, but she left by being exposed to Yiddishkeit and looking about how religious values can be integrated with a normal, healthy life. And I think that there is a distinction between the followers who I think are just looking for that idealism, that narus, milashon hisorus, milashon idealism, as opposed to the leaders who have very demagogue, not to be confused with my book, Synagogue, values where they're all about that black and white binary of it's either emes or sheker, it's with us or against us.
Well, Rabbi Dovid, thank you very much, and I urge everybody, if you haven't bought one of his amazing Sfarim, Beroiges Rachmim Tisker, or now Synagogue, you should go out and get it. It's absolutely, you can't put it down. Thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Be well.
Kolta, bye-bye.